A tragic murder in Chicago sparks continued debate over migrant sanctuary cities. What impact is AI having on the energy sector? America's talking, and Illinois State Police audited. This is the Center Square Daily for Wednesday, March 25th, 2026. I'm your host, Greg Bishop. After the murder of a Loyola University student in Chicago, allegedly by a migrant who was in the country illegally, the debate around migrant sanctuary cities and policies continues. Sheridan Gorman, 18 years old of Yorktown Heights, New York, was murdered in Chicago last Thursday. A Venezuelan national was charged. Now, during the swearing-in of Oklahoma U.S. Senator Markwayne Mullin as the new Department of Homeland Security Secretary Tuesday, President Donald Trump explained the tragedy.
On Thursday, a precious 18-year-old college student named Sheridan Gorman was shot and killed while she was walking in a park. She was just walking in the park, didn't do anything. The illegal alien monster charged with Sheridan's brutal murder had come illegally from Venezuela and been released into our country by sleepy Joe Biden. But he was then arrested and released again by Democrat governor, a real slob of a governor, J.B. Pritzker, in the sanctuary city of Chicago, which we could make safe in 2 months, I would say. 2 months if we sent in the group.
Now, Chicago is a migrant sanctuary city with a so-called welcoming ordinance and other policies in city and county and state government prohibiting local law enforcement, including jailers, from cooperating with federal immigration officials. Now, Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker, the president just referenced, he told reporters at the state capitol in Springfield, Illinois, Tuesday that Trump's administration is partly to blame.
Well, this has been a terrible tragedy, and I know that the Gorman family has suffered mightily. I agree, there have been real failures. Those failures, of course, extend beyond the borders of Illinois. That's their national failures, a failure to have comprehensive immigration reform, a failure of the president to follow his own edict to go after the worst of the worst.
Have you tried to speak with Sheridan's parents? If so, what did they say? If not, why not?
Well, first of all, I wanted to give them time to grieve, but I have reached out to local officials who have talked to them to express my condolences, my wife's condolences as well. We'll, at the appropriate time, certainly speak directly with them.
Now, Illinois Republicans said Pritzker is showing his true colors. Illinois House Minority Leader Tony McCombie said no one believes that Trump is to blame for Biden's open border that let this criminal in, or for Pritzker's failed sanctuary state and soft on crime policies that attract illegal immigrants here to Illinois. Stop passing the blame, McCombie said. It is within your authority to fix the problem, Governor. She says that various policies from Illinois' Trust Act and other migrant sanctuary policies make things worse. Other Republicans from Illinois at the state capitol Tuesday also reacting from both the House and Senate.
Governor Pritzker is the first one to go to other communities to talk about the tragedies that supposedly take place there when he wants to point his finger at our law enforcement community. But where's the outrage in Illinois? Once again, another person senselessly murdered on the streets of Illinois.
Have you had enough yet? Have you had enough of the deadly consequences of Governor Pritzker's failed policies? And now the chaos inside the city hall is spilling into the open. The mayor's deputy mayor for public safety was fired and now is sounding the alarm on what we all knew all along. Brandon Johnson's administration is openly anti-police.
These incidents are not just isolated to Chicago. Former Virginia Attorney General Jason Miyares joined a family of Stephanie Minter at the Virginia State Capitol Tuesday, calling for policy changes following her killing in Fairfax County. The Center Square's Shirlene Guerrero reports Minter was fatally stabbed at a bus stop. Police have identified the suspect, who's been charged with second-degree murder in the case, and they say the suspect was in the United States illegally and had more than 30 prior arrests. The Department of Homeland Security also said immigration authorities had previously lodged a detainer order against him. Minter's mother, Cheryl, called for changes to prevent similar cases. She said changes have to happen. It's just got to. In Philadelphia, the Center Square regional editor Kristen Smith reports residents there expressed both support and opposition for migrant sanctuary policies during a recent Pittsburgh City Council meeting.
My name is Mark McKean. I live in the 9th Ward. I believe in the rule of law. I don't believe in council, who is the legislative branch of the city, making laws that people should ignore. And council should not do that either as it pertains to federal immigration law. There's a difference between illegal immigration and legal immigration. What I see that you council people are doing is a quasi sanctuary city legislation. And I'm not for that. And most Americans are not. So you can sit there and drink your lattes and embrace your San Francisco buddies, but that shouldn't happen here in Pittsburgh, because we believe, most of us believe in the rule of law.
I'm Holly Hickling. I'm from East Carnegie. I wasn't planning on speaking today, but I've suddenly felt a little bit inspired. I wanted to thank the council people who are bringing forward the immigrant protection legislation. Very excited about that. I'm the executive director of the Global Switchboard. We're a human rights organization, and we.
So from Chicago to Pittsburgh and now Phoenix, you have Arizona State Senator John Kavanaugh criticizing the city of Phoenix on its resolution restricting federal immigration enforcement. Kavanaugh told the Center Square contributor Zachary Schmidt that Phoenix's resolution limiting U.S. immigration and customs enforcement operations in the city is, quote, illegal and grandstanding virtue signaling. On Wednesday afternoon, the Phoenix City Council will vote on a resolution requiring federal law enforcement to obtain the city's approval before conducting law enforcement activity. That meeting is set for 2:30 Mountain Time and will live stream at phoenix.gov. That resolution says that law enforcement not to cooperate with and help federal immigration authorities, and that's something that the Center Square will continue to watch. From how local and state governments are dealing with immigration enforcement, there's also controversy on how they're dealing with energy policy. The Maryland Supreme Court Tuesday dismissed 3 lawsuits by Democrat-run jurisdictions claiming that oil and gas companies concealed information about their products' contributions to climate change, leading to significant costs. To react to that and share some insights on how artificial intelligence is impacting the economy and the energy sector, we're joined now by Steve Goreham. He's the executive director of the Climate Science Coalition of America. Steve, it's been a while since I've talked with you, having gone all the way back to terrestrial radio. So thank you for taking time here now with the Center Square Daily. And I want to get your reaction to this. In a 3-2 decision, you had justices essentially say that Baltimore, Annapolis, and a county improperly tried to use state and local nuisance laws to financially punish defendants like BP, ExxonMobil, Chevron, with climate change when the causes, they say, are international issues that cross local boundaries. Steve, what does this mean for the nation's oil industry?
Hi, Greg. Great to join you again. Yeah, this is one of many court cases. There are something like about 25 of these that are running now. The city of Chicago, state of New York, Vermont. There's one Colorado at the Supreme Court right now. And these local jurisdictions basically believe that oil company emissions of carbon dioxide are causing dangerous climate change. And despite the fact that it was legal for people to use hydrocarbons in fuel and in industry and to heat homes for many decades, they're now trying to go back and sue for damages. And we have a number of states like New York and others in New England that have passed laws saying that oil companies have to come up with billions of dollars in damages for their past emissions. Just a lot of problems with these, and the Maryland court is sort of in line with many of the other courts. Many of these suits are still running, but they've been rejected in lower courts for many years, and there has not been a single case where monetary damages have been awarded to plaintiffs from oil companies yet. There have been some climate suits that are successful, but those are usually groups that sue governments and say, you need to look at this, you need to pass regulations. But the damages against oil companies just have not occurred. So This is just another suit of many. And typically courts have said that this is the job of not state governments, but the federal government to make this determination. So just another one of these cases that is falling down.
I want to talk a little bit about the impact artificial intelligence is having on the energy sector, but still with this idea, what would happen to the oil and gas industry if, say, there is a case that proceeds and they're having to fork over hundreds of millions or billions of dollars? Would that just open the door for more increased costs for consumers at home?
Well, we'll have to see. And there are a lot of legal costs. Matter of fact, a number of the members of boards of directors of oil and gas companies have been personally sued by different groups. So it can be very hazardous if you're in those industries. By the way, it is now the official position of the United States government that greenhouse gases do not cause dangerous climate change. And as a matter of fact, the EPA just rescinded the endangerment finding in 2009 from its own agency, the EPA, that said that humans, U.S. citizens were being endangered by greenhouse gas emissions. The EPA has now rolled that back. So the official government position is that greenhouse gases are not a pollutant, despite many of these courts trying to say that they are. And here's a quote from the EPA issue. Quote, the EPA separately concludes that its regulations have not and cannot have any material impact on global climate change concerns, rendering them futile and providing another basis for today's action. So really a big change. And not only a lot of these court cases, but many regulations on auto industry and power plants are disappearing, at least for the next 3 years until we get a different administration in place.
Well, I think we could definitely spend an entire hour on the whipsaw effect that may create if we get a different philosophy in the White House and what that could mean to the energy sector. We're joined by Steve Goreham. He is Executive Director of the Climate Science Coalition of America. Steve, in a recent article, you point out artificial intelligence. It's now driving electrical power in the United States. What are the implications of this, especially when you talk about local opposition that we're seeing pop up that are concerned about land rights and possible impacts on the availability of power?
Well, in short, we have an economic transformation going on in the United States and a brewing political battle is the second half of this. And in just 3 years since November 2022, when ChatGPT released their artificial intelligence chatbot, which showed that machines could talk like humans. And then we've had expansions of all this. Artificial intelligence can translate dozens of languages, assemble prose and poetry, generate audio, images, and videos. We've also had AI models that score better than humans on the bar exam, and we just had one get 100% on the U.S. medical licensing exam. So these things are coming along. They're changing everything. And this year, 2026, we have the big tech companies, Amazon, Microsoft, Google, Meta, and Oracle, that are spending $650 billion combined on data centers. And this is a number that's bigger than the individual gross domestic product of 168 nations on Earth.
Wow.
We had, at the start of 2024, we had only 2,700 data centers in the U.S. Now we have over 4,000, and the old ones are being upgraded as well. They used to just run the internet and do cloud storage. Now they're running these AI routines. And so we're doing things like we're restarting nuclear plants, we're extending coal plants. More than 200 gas-fired power plants are under construction. So we have a tremendous revolution going on. But you're right, we have rising opposition to this now. Just today, Senator Bernie Sanders and Representative Ocasio-Cortez have introduced a bill in Congress calling for the halt to all data center construction in the United States. And so this is shaping up to be a big battle between the Trump administration and the progressive and environmental groups.
Well, Steve, it seems too it's showing a divide amongst those who want to rely on so-called renewable or green energy, be it windmills or solar panels, or as we're seeing in some states, a push to carve out tax credits for battery storage, versus those who are saying we've got coal under our feet, we've got oil under our feet, and these things are reliable base load generators of power. Talk a bit about that and how we're seeing which side might be winning in this. Is it going to be power plants that are having to be brought back online? Is it gas and coal-fired power plants and nuclear power plants? How do we talk a bit about that kind of polar opposites here that are really showing through because of the reliance on energy for artificial intelligence and data centers?
Yeah, we have a tremendous build out of power plants in the United States. We don't have enough power to power this AI revolution. Just to give you an example, Meta is building their Hyperion data center in Louisiana. They're claiming it's going to be the biggest data center in the Western Hemisphere, but I think there's other ones that are just as big. It covers 1,700 football fields. This thing is so big, 3.5 square miles. And when it's done in 2030, it's going to use twice as much electricity as the city of New Orleans. So these are really, really big events. And as you say, we have nuclear plants that are restarting the Palisades in Michigan, one of the 3 Mile Island plants in Pennsylvania. There's a plant in Iowa that's being restarted, and they're resuming construction on 2 plants in South Carolina. We're extending coal plants in Georgia, Indiana, Tennessee, Utah, West Virginia. But the big winner is natural gas. Over 200 natural gas plants are in planning or under construction, including 100 in Texas alone. And the latest thing is BYOP, bring your own power. These data centers are building a power plant right on site rather than even relying on the grid. And the good news about that is that's going to help keep electricity prices lower for the average consumer. As a matter of fact, a good recommendation for states is to have these data center people build their own power plant instead of trying to take power from the grid. So this has now revolutionized the power system in the United States. It's the biggest thing, and it was unforeseen up until 3 years ago.
You'd mentioned, this kind of divide you're seeing in some that want more renewable energy or green energy, but you're predicting in one of your recent books, The Green Breakdown, that the world's actually heading towards renewable energy failure. What does that mean, and what are some of the signs you're pointing to of that coming breakdown?
Well, there's a couple factors. One is renewables are just very expensive, and a lot of nations are realizing it. The second is the AI revolution. But right now we have major political parties around the world pushing back against net zero, the idea that we could get to net zero emissions by 2050, and against the ideology of climatism. Not only the Republicans in the United States, but in the United Kingdom, the Reform UK party, which is now leading in the polls, has coined the phrase net stupid zero. In Germany, the Alternative for Deutschland party, headed up by Alice Weidel, is now threatening to tear down all of the wind turbines in Germany. And they are polling number 2 in Germany for popularity, this AfD party. And then just in the last 3 months, we had 2 parties in Australia that have said, that have voted against net zero. They say it's just too expensive. These are the Nationals and the Liberals. And so we see this happening all around the world. And it looks like the world is going to go back to sensible energy policy and away from this idea that we should be doing everything with wind and solar.
Steve Goreham, Executive Director of the Climate Science Coalition of America, greatly appreciate your time, and we'll definitely check back in with you here for the Center Square Daily. Now it's time for America's Talking, with headlines from across the country that you can get in your inbox now at thecentersquare.com. As a partial government shutdown continues, one major airline suspending services for flying lawmakers as travel chaos builds across the country at U.S. airports. The Center Square's Brett Rowland reporting the ongoing partial government shutdown having those ripples across the nation's air travel system, causing mounting delays with operational strains from TSA officers missing pay and airlines scaling back special services for lawmakers. The political standoff in Washington over the Department of Homeland Security funding creating real-world consequences for travelers, and it highlights the broader impact the impasse is having over various policies. Tuesday, Delta announced that it would pause certain services for members of Congress, citing a need to prioritize safety amid ongoing partisan disputes over DHS funding. While Democrats pushing for changes to immigration and customs enforcement operations, Republicans pushing back against those proposals, such as banning agents from wearing masks while on duty. The Los Angeles City Council has entered a $106.6 million 3-year contract for eviction defense and prevention services with a nonprofit legal aid group that's repeatedly sued the city over homeless-related issues. Legal Newsline's Michael Carroll reports in a 12-1 vote, the City Council approved the funding contract with the Legal Aid Foundation of Los Angeles on March 10th as part of a package that also includes funding for other community groups for outreach and homeless protection. The city's attorney's office had raised concerns about the oversight and review of the contract, which carries a program that was launched in 2021 to promote housing stability all across the city. But other groups that will receive funds during the 3-year program include Liberty Hill Foundation, Strategic Actions for a Just Economy, and Southern California Housing Rights Center. And again, some of these groups having sued the city. Seattle political commentator securing a victory Monday in a public records case against the city of Seattle. The Center Square associate editor Carlene Johnson reports the Citizen Action Defense Fund brought the case on behalf of Undivided Media LLC podcaster Brandy Cruz over the city's failure to properly comply with public records requests back in 2024. Attorneys explained that Cruz put in a records request to find out what was behind a last-minute change on an issue, but the city delayed supplying requested documents. The city responded via email telling Cruz the first installment of documents would be available after August, which was after the primary in which the council member was running, and that council member of question. The appellate court unanimously agreed this week, and an attorney for the plaintiff says the decision is a major step in government transparency. Attorney Jackson Maynard breaks down the lawsuit over public records fight with Seattle.
And basically they found that the first installment, they said, well, because that came within a matter of weeks, that probably was okay. So we're not going to find there's a violation there. But they did find a violation for the second installment. And they also found, based on the evidence of the city's failure to follow its own policies, that they did not act with reasonable diligence, which was one of our other issues we'd raised. So big win yesterday, big win for transparency, big win for public records. It comes in the end of Public Records Week and Open Government Week last week.
Now, city taxpayers may have to pay Cruz's legal fees, but it wasn't clear how much that would be. And that's America's Talking, with headlines you can find at thecentersquare.com. Be sure to get those headlines in your inbox by signing up for the newsletter today. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Center Square Daily. I'm your host, Greg Bishop. Now let's get Illinois in focus, with Illinois State Police having to respond to findings from the Illinois Auditor General's office. And this comes as the Illinois Legislative Audit Commission, a bipartisan group of Illinois state lawmakers, goes through various audits of all the state agencies and their spending. It's not just how much tax dollars they're spending, they also get audited on how they're interacting with state law and whether they're complying with state law. During Tuesday's Legislative Audit Commission hearing, an audit employee explained at least one finding that's got interest of a lot of people in Illinois with firearm owner identification cards.
We found the department did not comply with the requirements of the Firearm Owners Identification Card Act, or FOID. During testing of FOID applications, we noted for all 14 renewal applications tested, the renewal fees were deposited into the wrong fund, the State Police Revocation Enforcement Fund, instead of the State Police Firearm Services Fund. During testing of expiring FOID cards, we noted 2 of 40 cardholders were not notified that their cards were expiring within the mandated 180-day range. Notifications were made 19 days late in these instances. We recommended the department ensure notifications to FOID cardholders are sent in a timely manner and ensure fees are deposited in accordance with the Act.
Now, for those not familiar with Illinois' firearm owner's identification card, Illinois is one of about 4 states that have some kind of requirement for firearms owners to get an identification specifically as a firearm owner from some kind of government jurisdiction. In this case, it happens to be Illinois State Police. And several years ago, way before the pandemic, there were numerous complaints and calls for ending the FOID card system. As people were having their FOID cards renewed, they would have had to have waited. Some instances we had reported at thecentersquare.com up to 12 months for them to get their FOID card renewed after it expired. And you got to imagine during that 12 months, those firearms owners worried they're violating the law by owning firearms and not having an up-to-date firearm owner identification card. Illinois State Police Brendan Kelly was ISP director back then, and he pushed for a whole host of different things, including temporarily sending out letters to various people who were waiting for their FOID cards that they could show to a gun dealer to say, this is from Illinois State Police, I'm okay to buy this firearm. But we talked to gun dealers back then saying that piece of paper is not something they're willing to rely upon, as their license to sell guns could be at stake. Flash forward now here 6+ years, and you've got Illinois State Police Director Brendan Kelly responding to this recent audit reports about state police not complying with the FOID law, and he says they are in compliance.
The FOID system has undergone significant modernization, and the FOID backlog has been eliminated. That was a previous special audit of this commission. No, it's not the direct subject here today, but it's a tremendous accomplishment by the people that work in our Firearm Services Bureau. The average processing time now for a new FOID card is 14 days, and that's well below the statutory limitation.
There are about 2.5 million FOID card holders in the state of Illinois, just for reference. Meanwhile, yesterday at the Illinois State House, there was also conversation about school choice and early childhood issues when it comes to the ability to have school choice. We've got the federal program that the Trump administration announced as part of the One Big Beautiful Bill Act that was signed into law July 4th of last year. It included a national school choice scholarship program for young students to be able to tap into a privately funded fund where they could use those dollars to then go to a school of their choice if their school is not up to par, isn't performing, is not giving their students the best quality of education. Well, the question was posed to teachers union officials during a Illinois House committee yesterday with Republican State Representative Blaine Wilhauer talking about school choice and that federal tax credits for scholarships. Here's a little bit of that interaction.
We've got a lot of kids that are trapped in schools that are failing just because of their zip code, and I'm wondering if you guys support the federal tax credit that would help some of those kids, not even necessarily just get out of there, that would help them get more services.
We do not support and would not support the federal voucher program coming into Illinois. Philosophically, we think public money should be for public schools, and we would urge the legislature to reject opting into that program.
So you don't fully support doing anything that we can do to invest in students? How's that not an investment in students?
We think investing in our public schools and fully funding our public schools before we do anything else is the right process.
Now, Representative Wilhauer pushing back against that idea of fully funding schools first, before considering having Illinois opt into that federal school scholarship tax credit program that states across the country are opting into to give their students the ability to take advantage of those tax credits, but also for donors with private dollars to put into that fund. Wilhour says this has nothing to do with tax dollars.
This isn't taking any money out of the budget or doing any of that. These are private citizens that are making donations that then can be used to help students in these schools and frankly in public schools as well, that would help combat some of the challenges that you're talking about right now. I hear you. It seems to me like you're all about investing in more of the institutional stuff than the actual students, and we're here to look after the actual students first.
Now, Wilhour, again, talking about investing in kids. Interestingly enough, there was a program in Illinois, a very unique program at the time, called the Invest in Kids Act, and that had a school scholarship program where private dollars could be donated and they would get a tax deduction in their Illinois property taxes, or Illinois income taxes rather, to be able to offer up that funding for children across the state to tap into to go to a school of their choice. That program began in 2019 but sunset in 2024 at the behest of unions in Illinois, saying that they didn't like the idea of tax dollars being taken away from public schools. But again, it was private donations to a fund, not tax dollars. And union leadership yesterday saying that it was a good thing that program sunset. Wilhour pushing back.
This legislature had an opportunity to renew the Invest in Kids program and did not, and chose not to.
Which was a major mistake.
We disagree on that as well.
I think 10,000 kids would disagree with you.
Well, yeah, look, I go back to my previous statement.
What is more important to us, the kids or your institution?
We would not be here standing before you today talking about the investments in public education if kids were not important. So I think we just disagree on the federal program.
Now, educators and union members were there talking about the need for increased public funding for public schools, but Wilhour again asking them, have we seen any better outcomes of these schools across Illinois with increased funding? Legislators are going to be crafting a budget for the state of Illinois. They have a May 31st deadline to do so, so we'll definitely be keeping an eye on that as the process plays out with Illinois in focus, only with the Center Square Daily. From my studios in Central Illinois, I'm Greg Bishop. Join us back here Thursday for more stories impacting you, the taxpayer, from across the country, only with the Center Square Daily.